Ladies and gentlemen, Moz-Art here. In this video I'm gonna show you how to replace your head gasket. There can be different reasons for replacing your head gasket. One of the reasons is that your engine has overheated. In that case, it is necessary to both resurface the head and sometimes also the block and install a new head gasket. Or you can see some oil in your coolant reservoir, or in your engine oil you see a white milky color in your oil. All this implicates that coolant present in your oil. Another reason for suspecting your head gasket is that you can see white smoke coming out of your exhaust. These are all the different reasons why you need to replace a head gasket. Firstly, a jack stand for safely working underneath the car, an extra jack because you're going to need to sustain the engine, a mirror for when you remove the exhaust pipe, a telescope magnet, an extension bar, crowbar, a light, some wrenches, ratchets and sockets, another sockets, some deep sockets, a collector pan for the cooling, and of course a new head gasket and new bolts. I use also let's say a mattress so I can easily and cozily working underneath the car. Let's analyze the situation and check what we all need to remove in order to reach the head gasket. Firstly, since we need to disconnect some electrical cables, it is necessary to remove the battery. As you can see here, all this stuff here, the intake, the exhaust, this intake pipe, and all this cozy, nice decorations needs to be removed in order to reach down the head gasket. So let's dive into this. The first steps will be to remove the negative and the positive of the battery, remove the battery, and in this case also its cage or its box. Next, to replace the vacuum hoses, the intake hose to the turbo, and also this let's make the engine nice covers. A 10mm socket, an extension if necessary, and a ratchet. To remove the battery. I will remove the cover too, so I can make enough room for myself to work. These are all 10mm bolts, 3 of them. So remove them so you can remove the box. I will leave the screws in there so I don't lose them. Next, remove the 5 connections of the vacuum pipe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will now be removing the intake hose to the turbocharger. In order to remove this cover, you need a T25, a Torx T25 to remove all these screws, to remove this cover, and also this one. As you can see here, there's another cover here to cover the timing belt. So remove this one too, carefully. The next steps will be to remove this box here, this cover. This is the computer for regulating the fuel, and this one is the air filter. This one also needs to be removed. This is the air intake coming in here, go into the filter, to the turbo, into the engine. So let's remove this one. This is a 10mm socket. Remove the bolt. And remove the air intake. Place back the bolt so not to lose it or use it for anything else. Just remove this cover here. So this connector for this computer for regulating the fuel injectors, etc. is exposed. There are 2 connectors here, one here and a bigger one down here. and the connector for the mass airflow sensor. This is the connector for the mass airflow sensor and the two connectors. Now you're ready to remove this box here. The next step I will be taking is to remove this air intake box here. This is a throttle body, and the throttle body is sensor and its computer. I will not remove it completely, I will just loose it and put it aside, so I can reach down here to the intake to these different cylinders. In order to remove this box here, down here, there are a total of 6 10mm bolts. Remove them and you will be able to put this air intake box aside. In order to remove this bolt, I will be using a 10mm socket and a small ratchet. The removal of the remaining 5 bolts will be the same. There is a total of 6 of them. There is also a vacuum hose here, just to plug it out, remove it. It is also necessary to remove this clip here in order to remove this air intake box completely. A flathead screwdriver will be sufficient. I removed it. Now I can place the air intake box aside. Now I have full access to this intake pipe here to the different cylinders. Alright, the air intake box has been removed. As you can see here, this is the intake pipes to the different cylinders. This is the fuel rail, the fuel injectors, 5 of them. This is a turbo 5 cylinder, and also here all the connectors, camshaft valve, the coils, the connectors here, and the V50 sensors. All these connectors here needs to be removed and placed aside so we can make place to remove the cover here. In order to remove the connector for the fuel rail sensor, just unclip it here and pull. For the injectors, push it in, this clip here, and pull. This is applicable for all 5 of them. All 5 connectors and the sensor have been removed, so we can place this cluster here aside. Now we'll be removing this of the camshaft. This clip needs to be pressed in and pulled. Alright. Also for the different coils, lift off this clip and pull. Okay, be careful when removing these cables or connectors, because because of the heat, this one can become brittle and damage or break easily. For the VVT valves, push this clip and pull it down. In order to push aside this cluster of wires, it is also necessary to remove the grounds of this wire. In this case, there are 2 10mm bolts, one here and the other one here, to remove so we can push this wire cluster of the different coils and sensors aside. This is one. The second one. Now the cluster is loose, so we can push it aside. to make room to continue working on the engine. Now I will be removing these 5 coils. It's also a 10mm bolt. Just wiggle it a bit. And this is the first coil. After removing so much screws, it is best to place all of them back where they were. So when reinstalling everything back, you will find the screws and you will know where they were. The next step is to remove this fuel rail. It is held in by 2 10mm bolts. 1, 2. It is also necessary to remove this intake pipe or the supply pipe. And this one is held in by 2 10mm bolts, also one here and the other one here. So first we will be removing this supply pipe, and then we will be removing this fuel rail. To remove excessive pressure, I will remove this nipple here, and this catch pan I will be catching some of the fuel so I can release some of the pressure in here. This is the first screw, one, and the second one. Now we'll be removing the 2 screws of the fuel rail. There's one over here, and the second one here. I will be removing this rail in the sense that only to push it aside, just to place it aside. Second one. In order to remove this fuel rail, the different injectors have an O-ring, and you need to wiggle all these fuel injectors in order to remove this fuel rail. In this case, be gentle, not to break anything or damage anything. After removing the fuel rail and its injectors, check if all the O-rings have come out, and check if all of them are intact and not damaged. Like I said before, after removing the screws, I will be placing them back, so I'm sure I will not lose them, and will use the correct ones when installing everything back. These are the screws for the fuel rails. Just do the same also, the 10mm screws for the supply pipe of the fuel. For the removal of this intake here, it is necessary to remove all these 6 in total 10mm bolts. 3 on the upstairs and 3 below there. Right, let's remove this bolt. After removal of the 6 bolts, it is necessary to remove this pipe here, which is connected down here, which is connected to the intake. After removal of that, it is also necessary to remove this breather valve here for the crankcase shaft. After removal of those, it is possible to remove this intake. Let's do this. This pipe here can be wiggled and taken out. This breather valve for me is easy, just pull it off. And now remove the intake. This is the breather pipe hose. This is the intake, and also its gasket.